AI is a great advisor, but it cannot be the decision maker. And when your employees understand that, the trust is automatically preserved.
Hi everyone, this is Shashwat, and with me today I have Ujala, Senior Director of HR at HealthEdge. Hi Ujala, how are you doing?
Doing good, Shashwat. Thank you for having me here
Thank you
today.
for doing this with us. And today we just have some couple of questions regarding Ujala's expertise, what she's good at, and what her take on this modern sort of company culture right now currently is. So the first question that I wanted to sort of ask you is that you began your journey in recruitment and now you're leading into more larger people culture, right? So how did those lessons from your previous experience sort of lead you to be a leader today?
Shashwat, when I look back at my early career in recruiting and client relations, I realized that those years shaped my leadership philosophy far more than any other senior title ever has. If I can think of one instance during my early years, I was working with a candidate, and that candidate underwent some 5 or 6 rounds of interviews, and then the hiring team went completely silent. The candidate kept calling me for like every day, and I did not have an answer. But what I did have was the sense of responsibility. So I made sure that I made it a point to call that candidate on a daily basis just to let him know that I have not forgotten you. But as soon as I have the update from the hiring managers, you'll be the first one that I'll call. He did not get selected though, and I was like very anxious when I was kind of picking up the phone and to inform him about that decision. I didn't know how he would react. But there's one thing that he said at that point in time which actually stays with me even now. He said, "I did not get the job, Ujala, but I felt really respected during the whole process." So that particular moment taught me something very fundamental. People are not always looking for good news. What they're looking for is respect, your presence, and honesty. And if you over these years, during my entire career journey, moving from hiring to people business partnering to now leading large India people function, this is one thing that plays again and again in my career, especially during the moments of change. If you see in our setup, for example, if you talk about the HR, we go through a lot of org restructuring exercises. You have a promotion cycle where not every employee is going to get what they are hoping for, or a situation like that of a merger that we are currently going through in our current organization. I feel the credibility of HR and leadership does not come from having perfect answers all the time. It basically comes from how you show up in these moments of change and uncertainty. So my guiding principle for my leadership, or rather my leadership guiding principle basically is 3-step. Be present. Even if you do not have all the answers, just be there for your employees. Second one, provide clarity. Employees are okay to hear from you that, we don't know this yet, rather than just going silent. Number 3, very important, I live by it day in and out. Be empathetic. Just think that there is a human being behind a simple data point or a head count, right? And now if you see, interestingly, in all the industries, we have these scorecards, we have these dashboards, we have these AI signals. We have so many of these things, right? But I feel a very simple human behavior of just picking up the phone, calling someone back, and acknowledging them in this AI era, I feel that has become even more powerful.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up, because as sort of companies move to automate their workflows and you have these very sophisticated AI filtering tools and such, and there's a bit of a dissociation nowadays that you see in a lot of corporate cultures where people don't feel valued, they feel very undervalued, they don't feel seen. And there's this dissociation that their leadership or the people who are supposed to handle them when the corporation are not having their best interest. I feel like, yeah, I think a little bit of that empathy is what is required for like people to be happy and satisfied and then do well in the place of work and not just feel like very apathetic to the situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a great sort of outlook and a point that you bring up. So sort of the next thing that I wanted to ask you is you have had sort of training and experience in computer applications, in HR, and also in like big executive programs. How do you think this combination of technical, managerial, and exec training and education is forming the way you lead your teams, especially when we move into this sort of automated AI sort of an era that we just spoke about?
Yes, my educational journey is a bit unconventional, I would say. But I think it is absolutely perfect in the world of AI that we are moving into. So my background in computer applications that gave me a lot of insight into logic and systems. Then HR keeps me grounded in people, emotions, and culture. And when I started investing in myself by taking these executive courses, all of this helped me or probably enabled me to zoom out and get an idea about the business and strategy. So I feel that hybrid combination of tech, HR, and business is something which is very, very important in the AI era right now.
Yeah.
Right. So in one of our organizations, we actually rolled out an AI model, or rather a chatbot with our applicant tracking system for our recruiting purposes. And what we started realizing is that the AI model is filtering out all the candidates who had employment gaps.
Yeah.
Right? When we started figuring out that why is this happening, and then when we saw AI was doing everything right because it was going through the data which was fed into it, and the historical offers or the candidates who were selected actually had no employment gaps. So AI model actually kind of trained itself to filter out those candidates. Because of my background in tech, I knew what the underlying cause was. We changed it. We changed some filters, and then we ended up hiring, some amazing candidates who would have taken breaks because of, caregiving or to start their entrepreneur journey or health or whatsoever reason, right? Here, what we understood is that AI was doing everything which was mathematically correct, but strategically, where our organization and our culture wanted to be, that was not going right. So that combination of knowing that when you bring all the three together, your tech and people, tech means, AI, and then the people perspective together, that's when you'll be able to connect the dots and you'll be able to make the rightful decisions.
Yeah.
Right. So if I have to look at my role right now, I see that my role is at the intersection of all three, like I said. And there's one thing which I keep asking myself again and again, that how can we leverage AI in such a way that we can make ourselves more human than less?
Definitely. That's again an interesting point that you bring up. At the end of the day, whatever advanced algorithms and stuff that we use, it's whatever input data that you feed it. So if the data doesn't align with your culture and your goal, it's still going to do what you gave. If you have taken extensive care on that, I think the system itself will be able to follow along with what the end goal of the company is essentially. The fear, I think, somewhere comes in how it's being used and in what sort of respects it's being used, as you just mentioned. Like you just saw the issue that there might be some factors which a system is overlooking because it was never told to look for that factor, which you said was the gap, as you mentioned. So as teams start adopting AI to make their processes more efficient and decrease the workload of people, how do you think these adoption should be handled by a company, and how should the employee sort of perceive these adoptions rather than being fearful of these adoptions or being very unsure about them? Where do you see this going? How should employees and leaders both perceive this adoption of this new tech that we're heading towards?
Shas, a great question. And I feel the heart of the question basically is trust. If employees do not fear AI or adopting AI, what they fear is the unknown of not knowing what is it that's being tracked. How is it being tracked? How is it being interpreted? These are some of the things that employees, if we as HRs make sure that we inform and provide clarity to our employees in that sense by letting them know that, okay, this is what we are tracking, because they would want to know whether it is what you're tracking as a part of the data. Is it the performance data, or you're tracking the sentiment analysis, or you're tracking something else? And why are you tracking it? Is another answer or the clarity that we should provide to our employees. Are we using that data for their employees' self-development, or we are doing it for, attrition prediction or workforce planning or any sort of risk mitigation? Now, another fear that employees will have is, who has access to that data? Is it only the managers or HR, or even the senior leadership also can see that data? Because that gives them that fear of whether or not this data is going to get used against us. But if you build that trust with your employees and say that ultimately there is human accountability at the end, right?
Yeah.
I look at it as this way, you validate the data, you interpret the data, you bring the human perspective in between, and then you decide what you want to do. So it's a combination of all of these steps. And when you follow all of these steps, AI is a great advisor, but it cannot be the decision maker. And when your employees understand that, the trust is automatically preserved. Right? And just think for an example, if these days, the doctors are using AI models to interpret your scans, right? So if your doctor has done that, you would want to know, right? But at the end of the day, you would still be okay for your doctor to take the final call on what your next line of treatment is going to look like. It's the same with HR. People are okay with AI. People are okay with the whole process of it until it's a black box for them, and they know, and they'll be heard during the process if they have any questions. And they know that ultimately there is a human judgment at the end of the day. So if HR, I'm talking about HR because they need to become that bridge to make sure that between AI and our employees, to make sure that adoption doesn't become tricky. It actually becomes not a technology problem, it becomes a psychology problem, right? So if you're able to explain to your employees in a very plain, simple way that what we are doing, and explain the reason behind it, the rationale behind it, then the trust will not erode, it will actually improve, is what I feel.
So pivoting off what you just said, of how companies are adopting AI and how trust and transparency are very important. Like, you have tools in manufacturing, you have these very high risk tools, you have these hand drills and hand saws, and obviously the people who use them are very much trained to use them. So you know to trust them that they'll use this tool properly. In the same vein, how do you think training plays an important role in removing this anxiousness of AI? If employees know that the people using these AI tools are trained to use them, how to interpret the data, how to go about it properly, and so on, do you think that is something that would bring in more trust with the people and the departments than using it?
I absolutely agree. It is very, very important because AI has to be used very thoughtfully and very ethically. So if I talk about organizations, many organizations now have the set of approved AI tools that you've rolled out to your employees and that they can use. For example, in our company, we have rolled out something called as Claude, the AI tool that our developers and even the cross departments use as well. So obviously, it is very, very important for them to be able to use it, to get trained on using it. Every company is providing enough learning resources for people to be able to use that. It's not just about using and giving the right prompts and how the use cases can be, how you can build some use cases through AI and all of that. It's also about how ethically you can use it. But every organization now, with so much of AI coming into the picture, have their ethical committees. They have these governance models which are in place. So learning how to use the tool is one part of it, but then how to use it ethically and within the governance guardrails is another part of it.
In the HR department, which is like your primary expertise right now, what segment in the HR is the most beneficial for AI? Like, what process do you think benefits the most with these advanced models and all of that? And where do you still think you being a leader and you being a person is still very much important, which is something like AI is still not ready whatsoever for it?
I really don't think of AI as replacing HR. I think of AI as recalibrating and redefining the way we think, where HR spends most of its time on and how we can free up HR to spend time on much higher value work. For example, if you see in our world of HR, a lot of our teams are spending time in manual, operational, data heavy work, and which can easily be taken over by AI. And that will definitely help free up our HR professionals to do much more impactful and meaningful work. Let's take an instance. We were talking about talent acquisition, and an AI model can screen thousands of resumes in just minutes, which would take, say, weeks for our recruiters to sift through. Now, in HR operations also, there are so many operational tier zero level sort of a work, which is very repetitive in nature, where AI chatbots can add a lot of value, just responding to day-to-day employee queries, automating your offer letters, other employment documents, and all of that. So that's where I feel AI can add a lot of value. But there still are a lot of areas which clearly need a lot more human depth. For example, AI cannot do your performance conversations. It can't lead your performance conversations. Your employee relations and grievance handling, and your change management and change conversations, a lot more human touch and human intelligence, and leadership coaching and development. All these things is something that a machine cannot do and should not do. So AI is a good advisor for you these cases. And if I have to sum it up, I would say let AI take away the repetitive work from you and let humans own the relational.
So if you see AI being, as you mentioned, if it takes a lot of the repetitive work, it will probably leave people with more time to actually handle like the more difficult situations, which maybe in a company handling thousands of people, they might not get enough time for that. Maybe there would be more space and more time given to one-to-one employee conversations, larger employee grievance handling. If these repetitive tasks, which again, HR, again, rather than dealing with data, they can deal with people more.
Yeah.
So I think over there, I think the gap can be sort of solved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's exactly what AI is helping us do. Taking away all the heavy lifting, giving the time away to our HR team to focus on, like I said, more meaningful and impactful and more strategic work.
So as we talk about how these AI workflows and automations frees up time for the HR, right, to do more high level functions, which definitely require a lot more thought process than just analyzing data. So what do you think how a team should handle a situation where an AI given insight or what the data sort of tells you is sort of conflicting with a manager's own intuition? Like what you as a leader and as a manager feel is conflicting with the data. How do you go about that situation? And how do you think you can still maintain the trust on both sides between a manager and an employee, sort of?
Yeah. This becomes tricky, and this is one of the trickiest parts of AI adoption in any organization, frankly speaking, because it's not technology, but this basically is psychology. If the HRs or the people team does not do this right, we have a fear of creating managers who either start dismissing AI, saying, "Oh, we know our people better than the system, so why do we trust the system?" Or they start over trusting AI and say, "Oh, this is scientific, this is mathematical, so this must be right." And that's the place where you really need to find the balance and the right balance. So whenever there is a conflict between what manager is feeling versus the AI output, or the human is feeling versus the output, there are certain steps that we really need to follow. First of all, validate the data. What is being fed into the AI model, and what is the data that's being fed, and is the data clean? The next step is understand the intuition of the manager. Why is manager feeling differently or disagrees with what the AI output is? Then you combine both the perspectives, use AI as an advisor, but not as a verdict. And then the last step is basically explain the situation. Whatever decision is being made, what were the parameters which were used to make that decision and why that decision was made? And when you do all these steps right, you definitely will be able to preserve the trust with your managers, and managers will be more open to using the AI models, because then they know the HR team plays a very, very critical role of making the managers understand that AI is here to help you and it's not working against you.
Yeah.
Right? And to the organization, we can say that we are using the data that is informing the decisions. So when we play that middle ground really well, and I think that adoption of AI and the ethical adoption of AI becomes easier.
Yeah. And just to cap off everything, this is the last question that I want to get into with this is, what are your thoughts on, let's say, if people get freed from the mundane, the data repetitive tasks, do you think AI has or gives us the path forward to actually increase the empathy in the organization, freeing up people, giving proper data-driven insights? As you mentioned, the data must be clean, or input funnel has to be clean. Do you think leveraging these tools ethically would lead to more empathy rather than less, which is the fear within the organization? Do you think that leaves people with more room and more data to take more mindful, more thoughtful, and more empathetic decisions?
So, Shashwat, in our today's world, today's organizations or the world that you see, I feel our managers are not empathy deficient. They are time deficient. It becomes very difficult for them to actually sift through so much of data to basically get those triggers as to which is the employee who's getting a burnout, feeling overwhelmed with work. Or practically, it's not possible for the managers to go through or sift through thousands of comments which the employees submit as a part of the employee surveys. It's not practically possible. So they don't have time to do all of that. That's where I feel AI shines more. In one instance, what we did was we actually started analyzing the recognition data of a simple business unit. And one thing that we realized is that the patterns which were showing was that the awards are repeatedly going to the similar set of people. Yeah. The same group of people. It was unconscious. It wasn't like managers were deliberately going and nominating the same set of people for the awards. But when we brought that data back to the managers, it was an eye-opener. And we saw a lot of behavior change in our managers because they understood, and then they started to see who are our quiet contributors. There were people in their teams who were doing outstanding work. They were going over and beyond, but they did not know the skill of how to present themselves and lacked executive presence. So that's when they started paying attention to those folks. Now, what AI did here? Did it magically make your managers empathetic? No, it didn't, because empathy definitely will come from your own values, your own culture, and you being self-aware, right? But what AI helped in this case is to direct the managers, gave them the signals, and directed them that where empathy is more needed. So that's how I feel that it's powerful, because AI will not make you empathetic, but it can give you signals to basically direct you and help you understand where empathy is urgently needed.
These are some really good points that you bring up about data-driven empathy. So like any other tool, it's making you think about the data more, giving you better perspectives on it, which, as you mentioned, like going through tens of thousands of insights as a human is very time consuming. And a lot of times we might miss something within that. It's almost about using it as like any other tool. You need to learn it. You need to be trained on it. But then again, it's up to the user of how to ethically use it, especially when it comes to like when you're dealing with people. Having just that human touch is what's going to bring your team across the finish line. Just to end all of this, do you have any other thoughts? Anything that you would like to bring up?
Everybody is talking about ethical AI and how to use AI ethically. And like I mentioned, most of the organizations now have these AI ethics councils and cross-functional governance councils. I strongly recommend that HR should have a seat at the table there, because there are these things like how to bring more fairness, more inclusion, and psychological safety is something that lives in the world of HR.
Thank you so much, Ujala, for doing this with us and giving your thoughts on this new technology that everyone's adopting and a bit fearful about. But I think a lot of your points were very valid, and I think that's something which people need to hear. So thank you so much for doing this with us. And thanks to everyone for watching.